Hello, I'm Chloe Harrison, and today I'm here to tell you why Omar Khadr should have been treated as a child soldier. Omar Khadr is a Toronto-born Canadian who was captured after a firefight by U.S. soldiers in 2002 when he was only 15 years old. The Paris Principles, which Canada endorses, state that, quote, a child who is associated with an armed force or group refers to any person below 18 years of age who has been recruited or used by an armed force or group in any capacity. The principles also state that child soldiers accused of committing crimes should, quote, be considered primarily as victims of offenses against international law, not only as perpetrators. They also must be protected under international law. For some history on Omar Khadr, he was born in Toronto, Ontario in 1986. His parents were Omar Khadr from Egypt and Mahaz Aslamana from Palestine. His father worked for Muslim charities in Pakistan and Afghanistan and frequently moved his family between Pakistan and Canada. He eventually became friendly with terrorist mastermind Osama bin Laden and subsequently became a financier and supporter of the Al-Qaeda terrorist group. In 2002, Omar was sent to Afghanistan by his father to act as a translator for the Al-Qaeda group. Later that year, Omar was the only survivor among a group of militants in a firefight against U.S. soldiers. During this firefight, he allegedly threw a grenade that killed one U.S. soldier and injured another. He was wounded during this firefight, so the Americans took their wounded hostage to Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, where he received medical treatment and was interrogated. He later was transferred to the notorious prison at U.S. Naval Base Guantanamo Bay in October of 2002. Omar had just turned 16, and being 16 was one of the youngest ever held at Guantanamo Bay. Here are just some pictures of Omar's family. This is Omar's father, Ahmed, and a picture of his mother and sister and brother who was wounded in a firefight between Pakistan forces when his father was also killed, and a picture of all the siblings together. So, some public opinion. At first, the transfer to Guantanamo Bay was opposed by the Canadian government due to Khadr's age. However, the U.S. ignored Canada's request and continued sending minors, including Omar, to Guantanamo Bay. All of a sudden, attitudes hardened, and his age became less of a controversy. Some believe it is because the then Prime Minister intervened to have his father Ahmed freed from prison in Pakistan. His situation was also complicated by a CBC documentary that came out in 2004, showing his mother and sister expressing their views sympathetic to Al-Qaeda and critical of Canada. This documentary angered many Canadians and certainly did not help Omar's situation. It would take years before the public viewed Omar in a more favorable light during his legal struggles. Legal connections. In the case of Omar Khadr, the U.S. and Canada have consistently failed to uphold internationally accepted standards for how to deal with child soldiers. During his time at Guantanamo, his basic human rights were violated time and time again. For example, in efforts to soften him up for interrogations, Omar was not allowed to sleep for 3 weeks leading up to the interrogations. They call this the frequent flyer program, where they constantly move him from cell to cell, withholding sleep. This violates Section 7 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the protection of the life and liberty and security of the person. Khadr was also detained at Guantanamo for more than 3 years before he was charged in January of 2006. This violates Section 11 of the Charter, and Section 11 of the Charter, you must be charged without delay and tried within a reasonable time. He was also not provided access to legal counsel until November of 2004. This violates Section 10 of the Charter, the right to retain counsel, and also Article 37 of the Conventions of the Rights of the Child. In 5 years, he was also not allowed only allowed to speak to his family once. This violates Articles 37 and 40 of the Conventions on the Rights of the Child, the right to maintain contact. Current context. In 2008, the Supreme Court of Canada ordered the government to turn over video of the interrogations between Omar and U.S. soldiers. This would be the first of 3 favorable rulings he would win. This video caused a public outcry because most of the video showed Omar sobbing for his mother. In 2010, documents released by WikiLeaks show the Canadian government had decided not to ask for Khadr's repatriation to Canada, like all Western countries had before. Later, the director of CSIS said the release of interrogation videos would cause a, quote, knee-jerk of anti-Americanism and would cause, quote, a knee-jerk of anti-Americanism. In January of 2010, this Supreme Court would again rule against the government, finding that the Guantanamo interrogations had violated Khadr's constitutional rights, barring further questioning, but however they still refused Khadr's repatriation. To prosecute the so-called worst of the worst, the U.S. decided to bypass civilian courts and try Omar by military commission. The Human Rights and Legal Courts of USSC criticized the commissions for the lack of due process, and they made no distinction between U.S. adults, and their rules allowed for indefinite detention even after acquittal. In October of 2010, Khadr pleaded guilty to 5 war crimes in exchange for a further 8-year sentence. He admitted to killing and trying to kill the U.S. soldiers and for being a member of the Al-Qaeda group. The guilty plea urged on him by his lawyers was the only way for him to ever return to Canada. He could return to Canada after finishing out his 8-year sentence, and he could finish out his 8-year sentence in Canada after one final year at Guantanamo. Later, the repatriation papers were finally signed in September of 2012. In 2013, Khadr's lawyers argued that the 8-year sentence given to him by the military commission could only be interpreted as a youth sentence. This would require the government to treat him as a young offender. A decision came down in 2014 that said his sentence could only be interpreted as a youth sentence. In March of 2015, Khadr's lawyers argued he should be freed on bail, and this came true on May 7th when he was finally released on bail. This is a picture of Omar after he was released on bail. He was required to live with his lawyer, but he continued. However, he was required to live with his lawyer. For some more current context, an Angus Reid poll in 2009 found that 52% of respondents were unsympathetic to Omar and his situation. Another poll in 2010 found that 60% were against the return from Guantanamo Bay, and only 24% supported it. Later, an Angus Reid poll in May of 2015 found that 67% said that Khadr should have been tested as a child soldier. The treatment of Omar as a terrorist and not a child soldier was undoubtedly mistaken. It is very important to remember that Omar is a victim in all this. Over the past 13 years, Khadr's rights have been violated time and time again, and he deserves to be rehabilitated into today's society. Finally, Omar is free at last, and I end this presentation with a quote from Omar Khadr. "There's nothing I can do about the past, but there's something I can do about the future." Thank you.